Now, I just want to bring on our last guest speaker for the evening, and to introduce Alyas Karmani from Bradford. He is the director of the Street Project. He is a recognised youth worker. He is involved in diversity and equality. He's also a councillor for the Respect Party, and he's here with us tonight to talk a little bit about the rise in Islamophobia. So, Alyas, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for inviting me, and thank you everyone for taking the time out to listen. You've been really patient with us, and I really appreciate it. We're talking about a really, vital subject in terms of our existence as a society. I think this is one of the most important issues globally, actually. But it's quite sad that it's not given the importance that it should be given in terms of school and in terms of having safe space discussions like that. I think one of the biggest issues in the world at the moment is the fact that, we are living in a global village. The world, as they say, is getting smaller and smaller. But in terms of real understanding of each other, we seem to be profoundly misunderstanding each other. And it's ignorance, I think, which is the real clash that takes place in the world. It's not a clash of civilizations or a clash of people or a clash of faiths. It's a clash of ignorances. It's really interesting. People who are completely ignorant of each other's reality are so opinionated about each other. And we need to be worldly, and we need to listen to each other, and we need to exchange our ideas and understand our commonality. And just building on what Laura's wonderful words, we've allowed the mainstream to be hijacked. And we're not listening to young people in particular in society. Abdul Qadir and I were just saying, the Muslim community in the UK, half them are under the age of 25. That's our demographic, and it's reflected across Europe and in Bradford, which will be the youngest city in Europe by 2020. And I think that's a real positive thing, that we've got so many young people in British society. But what kind of a reality are we creating for them in the future? Are we creating openness or tolerance? Or are we allowing society to be closed down? Because let me tell you, when we let society close down, that's dangerous for everyone. I always say, the work that I've done with young people who are at risk of violence and extremism, when a young person feels they have no place in society, no stake in society, and nothing to lose, we have everything to lose. Because we've got stake in society, we've got a purpose, we've got direction. And that's, I've changed some of the things I was going to talk about. One of the things I've been talking about for the last couple of weeks on the grooming issue is the fact that, we have massive disconnect in British society at the moment. And that's disconnect between young people and old people, young people within their families, with their parents. That's why they look for surrogate fathers. On an ideological level, there's a massive disconnect. On a political level, political leaders are not correcting because they're seen as complicit with corporations and corrupt with bankers and stuff like that. Young people are really angry out there. Young Muslims are really angry. I've never known Muslims being more angry than they've ever been. Wouldn't you be angry after a decade of the war on terror, where every day you've had high-profile media stories? If you're not a terrorist, you're a groomer. If you're not a groomer, then you don't fit into British society. And it's a drip feed every day. Imagine that was your formative years. You're growing up in this reality, that every day you see a negative story about Islam. How does that put you in terms of where you see your purpose and your role in society? One of the things we've got to understand, and that's so valuable having a panel like this, and the work that I've done with ex-neo-Nazis across Europe as well, extremists need extremists. They fuel each other. And that occurs because the mainstream fails in connecting with people, that people have to gravitate towards the extremes. So when I see guys going towards al-Muhajirun, it's because the mainstream has failed. Mainstream mosques have failed, imams have failed, leaders have failed to engage young people on the substantive issues today in a meaningful, safe space discussion, giving them some respect, having a mature discussion with them. We're not doing anywhere near enough of that at the moment. And I think one of the most important frameworks for doing this, and that's why I'm so blessed that I've been fortunate enough to work in human rights for the last 25 years. And I do it because it's part of my universal values, as part of core to my Islamic values. That I believe, as Allah says in the Quran, and we gave dignity to the children of Adam. That means every single person should be treated with dignity and respect. I think human rights is such an important framework for us, but no one even talks about human rights in British society at the moment. And so as a result, we don't see the commonality that we have in terms of the simple thing, in terms of protecting each other's equality and working forward for, to do that. Now, I'm going to talk a bit about Islamophobia. Islamophobia has been on the rise across Europe. In fact, it's probably the last. It's a moral. Some commentators, it's a moral blind spot. The things we say about Muslims today, we would not say about anybody, any other group. Not black people, not people of any other ethnicity, of sexuality. All of these things we become more tolerant of and accepting of. But high, intelligent people can make the most ludicrous statements about Islam. You know, there's one story that Peter Roborn in the Mail talks about. He says, post-war Britain, how Islamophobic it is. He says that a bus driver ordered everyone off his bus so that he could, and he turned himself to Mecca and prayed his 5 prayers, yeah. It's the kind of tabloid kind of headlines. Absolutely ludicrous stories like this. And of course it's completely false. It's got no basis. It's a really good one I heard is in Gateshead, where the Subway sandwich place is a halal Subway sandwich place. So the EDL went to demonstrate about the opening of a halal Subway place, saying that, this is the Islamification of Britain, forgetting that Subway is a global US brand, yeah? Forget about global, but it's kind of bizarre, the kind of absolute ludicrous things people do, because they have this profound misunderstanding of others. And as a result of that doesn't open society, that closes down. So equally, that fuels Muslim discontent, anger, and racism towards the other as well. One of the profound problems I see is the fact that we're not really very worldly in terms of understanding each other. We all live in 1 square mile. And you grow up in 1 square mile. I see kids in Bradford growing up in 1 square mile. And they're born there, they go to school there, they go to college there, they go to university there, they go to mosque there, they go to the shops there, and they don't have experience outside of that. And that fuels a culture of fear and profound misunderstanding of the other. I want to make it very clear what we talk about when we talk about Islamophobia. It's got to be very clear, because again, sometimes people derogate and think, is this just about stifling debate on Islam? Is this about curtailing freedom of speech so that we can't speak it? No, of course it's not. I want to give you a story which tells you about what Islamophobia is actually about. Because unfortunately, most of the individuals, when it comes to being victims of Islamophobia, and what we're talking about is discrimination, violence, desecration of graves, mosques, property. But the hostility most often, it takes very little to fan anti-Muslim hostility at the moment. It's a single incident. And this is the bizarre thing. No matter how much the reality is that Muslims in Britain today have been part and parcel of the fabric of British society for, a century, if not more than that. We have 4 generations of British Muslims in the UK. In Cardiff, interestingly, it's about 5 or 6. 3 of them are British-born generations. All British-born generations of Muslims. I ask the question, at what point do Muslims actually become part of the mainstream in this society? And because we still continue to see them as the other. What do Muslims have to do? And it takes, no matter how many Mo Farah to me is such a symbol of what real British Islam is about and what this society is about. When he won his 2 medals last year, it was Ramadan at the time, and I was actually giving a lecture in the mosque just before the fast was about to break. I had my iPad out just to see if he'd won. Just monitoring to see if he'd won the race. And as he wins, he goes down and he prostrates, and he then does his lap of victory with the British flag. Now, to me, it shows that that's the reality of most British Muslims today. They do see Britain as part. Islam is a British religion. It's part and parcel of that. So how many people do you think are really comfortable with that notion? Islam is as British as anything else. It really is, when you really understand what Islam is actually about. But how many Mo Farahs will it take to stop another incident like drummer Lee Ridley's tragic death and murder, not to fuel hatred in British society? God forbid there's another incident like that. Unfortunately, the reality is that we can't control against amateur, self-styled, lone wolf individuals like this who are motivated just by madness, are deranged individuals who are driven by hate. We can't do anything about it. God forbid there's another incident like that, but how many more incidents can our society take, and how many Mo Farahs will it take, to really change the perception? And that's why the mainstream has to wake up and embrace that we have to open up society, by talking to each other, exchanging with each other, destroying and challenging our prejudices that we have. And that's the only way. Now, the hostility towards Muslims take little fanning on the streets. And this is how wicked it's disproportionately meted out on those people who are seen as visibly weak and are seen as a visible target. The Sikh community, disproportionately affected by Islamophobia. The Wisconsin killings that we saw last year, a far-right extremist going into a gurdwara and gunning people down in a gurdwara. Because why? Turbans, beards, they must be Muslims. And that's what I'm saying, ignorance. Okay, when you allow ignorance to prevail, this is what they see the consequence of that. Likewise, it's women, Muslim women, who are visibly Muslim because of their head covering and their dress, that have been disproportionately targeted by Islamophobic events and attacks. And I just want to put this into context. This is the attacks. Since 9/11, and I was working for the Commission for Racial Equality then, and we were monitoring hate crimes, and then in 2002, the European Commission Monitoring Report. More recently, in 2012, Amnesty International's report, Choice and Prejudice in Europe. All of them have identified a significant increase in Islamophobia in every single European country. Manifests itself in hate crime, violent crime towards Muslims, discrimination in the employment market, denying them resources, and consistent negative portrayals in the media. So that's unfortunately a terrible thing that's taken place. So this is a story which reflects that. Noor Jahan Khatun, she talks about her experience. She said, "Hi, morning. Thanks for having me on." This is a radio interview that she did, and I've spoken to her personally about it. What happened to me a good few years ago now was, I was walking home one evening, early evening, around 5 o'clock, and I noticed a group of young men, white men, ranging between 8 or 9 of them actually. They rushed towards me and pushed me down onto the floor. Now, while they were doing this, they were screaming out, "Bin Laden, scum," and other verbal, quite abusive words at me. Now, because they were a lot taller than me, they pushed me down to the ground. When I fell on the ground, I kept feeling my headscarf, my hijab being pulled off, my burqa being pulled, and I was being kicked, I was being punched. From what felt like a lifetime, that was going on. A few minutes later, these white young men, I felt something was being poured over me from a couple of various sources. Some sort of liquid or fluid. When I asked her this, and she said that she was really grateful that what was being poured on her was urine. And she said that she heard 3 men were urinating as it was splashing in her mouth. She realised it was urine, and it wasn't petrol. So that goes to show you kind of. So I felt physically sick. 3 sources of them, urine coming towards me. Now, towards the end of this attack, something was being rubbed on my face by 2 hands. Now, whether that was 1 person or 2 persons, I don't know, because I was trying to protect my head. She goes on. Now, while this was happening, I kept thinking, what on earth is it that they're rubbing on my face? I would never have believed that they had put dog feces and actually rubbed it all over my face. Now, the police came and classified it as a race attack. But clearly it wasn't a race attack, she says. And I cannot repeat on live what they were actually saying towards me. It was clearly driven by the fact that she was a Muslim woman. The language that they use, Bin Laden, Taliban, etc., etc. I've actually had, I'm presuming the same youth, a group of men, were shouting and throwing stones at me in the week before. So that's the reality of what we're actually talking about. We're not talking about curtailing our freedom. We're talking about a society where none of us can allow this to happen. Because this fuels directly the Al-Qaeda narrative and the grievance that individuals then exploit. And you've got to realise, with any type of grooming, whether it's far-right, Islamic extremism, or into a criminal gang, you have highly sophisticated individuals, charismatic, powerful individuals, who this environment is fertile for them to identify vulnerable individuals who they can exploit. And it's groups like Sri and the work that Abdul Qadir does and Andy does, working there on the front line, and Show Rated in the red card, on the front line, working with that disaffected mindset, which now is is on the extremities, is becoming much more the mainstream norm in terms of channeling people away from that anger and frustration, which will manifest itself in violence and extremism towards positive citizenship. We've got another massive challenge with the economic cuts at the moment, because most of this work, invaluable work, which, as I said, dealing with the biggest global issue in the world, like how we understand each other and how we live together, is being cut every day. Schools aren't doing it anymore. And the reason schools aren't doing it is because they've got no time in the national curriculum to do it. And I think that's complete, I can't believe that something so vital to the cohesion of our society is not given more importance in school. Actually, it's completely brushed under the carpet. This experience that I'm talking about in terms of Islamophobia, it's not, if you sit down with a group of Muslims and I ask you to do this, and we need to sit down and share these experiences that we have, 80% of Muslims in the last 10 years will report that they've had some Islamophobic incident. And we sit down and we actually laugh about it, because if you didn't laugh, you'd cry. I remember doing a talk just like this in Bath, walking straight out of the town hall with my rucksack on the back, and someone said, terrorist. Andy talks about the underground story, the train story. It's bizarre, because it actually happened to me. I cleared a whole underground train. Because I had my bag going towards getting the train. I'm a Londoner. I grew up my dad worked on London buses for 25 years. And we grew up going on the underground. After 7/7, I didn't go on the underground for 1.5 years. And then I went on the underground, I had my bag, and people got twitchy, and someone pulled the emergency, and this was a rush hour train, and everyone bolted out of the train, of that tube train. And bizarre, I had a seat next to me, and all I was thinking, Andy, was, please someone sit next to me. Please. Everyone bolted out of the train. There was about 2-3 people left, and the police came and everything else, and there was a bit of a standoff. Now, there were about 2-3 people left, and there was a young lad there. And if it wasn't for him, and I was really upset by the whole incident, and he saw it, and he came up to me afterwards, and he said to me, not all of us think like that. Now what an amazing, really, not all of us think like this. Not all of us are driven by fear. And this is the key thing about, it's on both sides, in terms of opening up society. And just want to move on a bit. And this is what I said, the discovery of others is the discovery of a relationship, not of a barrier. We need to learn much more about each other. The second point here, respect comes out of knowledge. When you recognize my reality is as complex as yours, that's when you begin to know me and respect me. The point here is this, we all have complex beliefs. We all have beliefs, traditions and values that are so important to us, they define who we are as people. I know my beliefs are so important to me as a Muslim, as an Englishman, as a Londoner living in Bradford, as an honorary Yorkshireman, as an Arsenal fan. Okay, but all these things are important to me. In the same way, I recognize that everyone else's beliefs are equally important to them. That's why in Islam we have the tradition, lakum dinukum walidin, you to your religion, us to ours. And when we recognize that, we make space for each other, we value each other, and we accept each other. But unfortunately, we've got a closing down of society, and I'll give you, obviously, these are just recent incidents. And as Andy's saying, we've got a potentially hot summer, hot in terms of tensions coming up. Again, this is in Cardiff, this is in Wales, just this week, desecration of Muslim grave. And the list goes on. Every day in the media, a drip feed, whether it's in comments pages, okay, and this is an American company that's made pork-tipped ammo so they can send Muslims to hell. I'm doing a lot of work around sexual violence at the moment as well, because what we're seeing is these paradigms developing. Young men around the world who have a profound disrespect culture for women. That's why we've got a global increase in violence against women. Why? Because we're quiet when we see things like this taking place. In the same way, it's reprehensible for me if a Muslim produces material like this denigrating Christians or people of any other faith, and that for me to remain quiet is contrary to my religion, as Abdul Qadir mentioned. Do not allow people to abuse things that are sacred to them, because inevitably that closes down society. Kill Muslims, and the list, it goes on and on. And I had this experience as well. I'm born in Britain, although my parents came from Pakistan. I've never been to Pakistan in my life. All my kids are born here. And to be told after 9/11, like many of us were told, go home. Where's home? I remember someone saying, go home. I don't want to go back to Birmingham, I don't like it. I want to go back to Birmingham, so... That's no disrespect to Brummies, by the way. And it goes on, the list goes on. As I said, the EDL. And in many ways, we've got two groups of disenfranchised, dispossessed, disempowered young men. And they need each other, just as, the EDL The Muslim Defence League and Al-Muhajirin and their ilk couldn't exist without the EDL. And that's why, Anjum Chowdhury and the Muhajirin were directly instrumental in the formation of the EDL in Luton. Because they need each other to sustain each other. And we allow them to, like I said, hijack that mainstream. We've got two groups of angry young men who couldn't kind of survive without each other. And David Oborn of the Mirror, he actually says that, it's become permissible to fabricate malicious falsehoods, okay, and therefore foment hatred against Muslims in ways which would be regarded as immoral and illegal if perpetrated against any other vulnerable group in society. And he himself says there's a direct parallel between that and the treatment of Nazis, okay, treatment of Jews, okay, in Nazi Germany. Many of the propaganda films that were done by Goebbels, they vilified Jews, they racially caricatured them, and then they saw them as they perpetuated this idea of the other in society. And just to give you an idea, this is one of the images that were portrayed. Now, we don't have images as crude as this, but what we do have are headlines which are more or less the same thing. You wouldn't have something like that about Jewish people today. That would be absolutely unacceptable. But unfortunately, the headlines are promoted instead. I want to then kind of like just focus on open and closed views, because this is essentially what Islamophobia is about. We've got closed views where individuals base their views on stereotypes, misconceptions, seeing others as different. This is the us and them, rather than seeing us as we, in immediate polarization. Making broad generalizations of the other, believing that they have nothing in common with us and the other way of life, and in some way they are inferior to us. A closed view. Now that contrasts with the open view. Islam is not seen as foreign, as alien, but part and parcel of British society. Our understanding is based on relationships and communication with Muslims, objective inquiry, trying to find out what we are all about, what makes us tick, mutual respect, exchange, openness, recognition that Islam can be part and parcel, and is part and parcel of the social fabric of our society. So that's the open and kind of closed views. And I would say for most individuals, all of us, we want to live in an open society where our interaction is based on that mutual respect, understanding, openness, and exchange of ideas. And for us to gravitate towards the closed views is actually, undermines who we are in terms of our basic humanity as well. So if I can give you an idea that this is a view that, I use in a lot of my work with young people. The problem is these people, they come over here and they bring from their own country, they come over here, they bring nothing except their problems, they have no interest about us and our ways, they just live amongst themselves. That's your classic closed view. And I would say, unfortunately and regrettably, this is a view, although we live in a global village and we have all this communicative media, where we should be better in communication with each other, then unfortunately this view is becoming much more prevalent in society. I don't know, what do you think? Do you agree or not? Anyone? Yeah? Who do you think this is directed against? What groups? It's not just Muslims, actually. And that's why this is not just about Muslims. Islamophobia isn't just about Muslims. It's about how we see difference and how we respect and value each other. That's really what it's about. Any groups? Can you just... Asylum seekers, refugees, the Roma. And the Roma are probably the most discriminated group in Europe, the whole of Europe. For decades. Non-white, anyone who's non-white, anyone who looks different. Migrants, Eastern Europeans, travellers. So you can see the kind of representation. Now, the key thing is that, okay, we hear this view. We hear it, in coffee bars. You probably hear it down the pub. I've been to the pub for a long time, so I wouldn't know. Okay. In the chicken and chips place, yeah, that's it. That's where. So you probably hear it in lots of different interesting places. You hear it on respectable coffee lounges as well. Do we challenge the view? Do we stand up and say, "Not in my name"? Is this unacceptable? Because that's really what this discussion and debate is about. How many challenge the groupthink? How many actually challenge their peers? I remember doing this session with a group of kids, and one individual said, "Look, although I've known Muslims, and I've got friends who are Muslims, when I hear people talking negative about Muslims, I don't say anything. Why? Because I don't want to put my head above the parapet. Because then, I'm the one who's targeted. And if you allow that to happen, then you allow prejudice to become mainstream. And the brave and courageous one is the one who stands against that. And I would say, in my tradition, it was the prophets and messengers, that was their job, to challenge groupthink and oppression and give dignity to people. So unfortunately, this is an indicator of what's going on. And this feeds into a much bigger challenge and problem that we have in society. Interestingly, this particular statement is about Brits on the Costa del Sol. So it was a Spanish guy saying, all these guys that come to the Costa del Sol, they come down here, and they don't learn our ways and our languages. So it's not something which is particular to group. Virtually every exchange and interaction between two people can lead to conflict because of perception. So what is our first reaction when we meet someone who is different? Do we judge? Are we selective? Or do we strive to understand? And if we're looking at solutions, it's got to be, we have to strive to understand. Okay, and this is what I want to finish with 2 points, just two quick points now. Who is August Landmesser? This is the work that I do in schools. So who is August Landmesser? August Landmesser, anyone know who August Landmesser is? Anyone heard of him? Okay, because what's interesting is this. This is part of a bigger presentation that I had. And one of the things I was going to talk about is that how is it possible that, what we've seen in history, people who lived side by side with each other, were neighbours with one another, then suddenly turned on each other and butchered each other. Unfortunately, that is a reality of history. When I talk about that, I've done a lot of work in Northern Ireland, which is just about an hour and a half flight from probably Newcastle airport. Even when I still go there are walls that divide people. They're given the obnoxious name peace walls. Okay, and they're dividing two people, and they're so high because you can't lob anything over. But the reality is, the biggest wall that divides people aren't the physical walls, but it's the perceptual wall. It's the way we see each other and we don't understand each other. That's the biggest wall that we have that divides ourselves. And so history shows that people have turned it, whether it's Hutus and Tutsis in Rwanda, whether it's Serbs and Bosnians, Muslims in the former Yugoslavia, whether it was Nazi Germany, whatever it is. So unfortunately, this is a reality, and it's all fueled by this. So who is August Landmesser? This is August Landmesser. I don't know if you can see the image. This is a picture in 1939 of, I think it's Hamburg shipbuilding yard, where everyone was, and they're launching a ship, where everyone was required to do a Nazi salute. Okay, and they were being monitored. You can notice in the picture, I don't know if you can see it too quickly, there's one person there who's not doing the Nazi salute. Can you see it all, everyone? Yeah? That's August Landmesser. And this is a picture of him. And I always used to say, when I came across this image, I would say, I hope that if I'm in that situation, I'm August Landmesser. That I'm not the coward that goes along with the groupthink in society. That I actually stand up. And this is what we've got to build. And it comes with this, like I said, it comes back to what I'm saying, in terms of basic human rights. To equip our young people in particular, and we've got to be role models that represent it, to show dignity to all the children of Adam, all shapes, colours, backgrounds, whatever they are. Because when you undermine the dignity of human beings and they have no place in society, that will close down the whole of us in society. I just want to finish with this. And this is a lovely quote I came across. I'm not responsible. I saw this on a comments page. I don't know who the author is. But he's talking about Muslims, the way they're represented in the media. He says, TV and media can keep on coming up with random portrayals of us in some existential fight between gay Muslims and Muslim terrorists, the two extremes. Okay, all the random are far removed from the reality portrayals. Meanwhile, we'll keep on driving you home after a night out, providing you with exotic food in restaurants and takeaways, tending to you in hospitals as doctors, nurses, staff and janitors, doing your accounts, working in your factories, populating the countless offices, making countless widgets and selling services to one another. We'll continue being your friends, your colleagues and your neighbours. It's up to you to choose whether to watch this nonsense or square it up with your personal encounter with Muslims or change the channel. Peace. Thank you, everyone.